Hi everybody, I actually made it down to Topsfield, Massachusetts today so that I could record this video on site, or actually near the site of where this story actually happened. So this is the story of Joanna Towne, and the story which sparked an accusation of witchcraft against her. And this story actually took place less than a mile right down this way here. So here's the story. A great question has been raised both at the Rebecca Nurse Homestead and on social media. Was Joanna Towne, the mother of Mary, Rebecca, and Sarah, actually accused of witchcraft? My quick answer is that Joanna was not formally charged, to my knowledge. However, I wanted to know from where this accusation stands and how it got to the point where Joanna is actually referred to as a witch in 1692, long after she died. Before I delve into this very interesting and entertaining story involving some of the who's who of Topsfield in 1670, I would like to address a couple of misconceptions. Misconception number one: Joanna was accused of witchcraft before emigrating. Heather Wilkinson Rojo, and I apologize if I am mispronouncing Heather's last name. Heather is a well-regarded genealogist in this area, and she states in her blog that it was actually Joanna's mother who was accused as a witch in Old England. Misconception number two: Joanna was a widow in 1670. As far as I know, she was not a widow. I have not found any evidence that her husband William died prior to 1670, and the Town Family Association lists William as having passed away after 1670, most likely in 1672 or 1673. Misconception number three: Joanna accused the mother of her own daughter-in-law of lying. Joanna does not use any variation of the word lying towards anyone who testified against the then minister Thomas Gilbert, though she clearly states that they are wrong and uncharitable towards him. So Thomas Gilbert, who began his ministry in Topsfield in 1663, again, right over in that direction, was considered to be a nonconformist. It was 3 years into his ministry when trouble started to brew. The allegations filed against Thomas by Reverend William Perkins were considered serious enough that they were both ordered to appear at the Ipswich court in late March of 1666. William accused Thomas of boldly speaking out publicly against the king. This was considered to be so extraordinary by the local court that the baffled judges referred the case to the next General Court of Election. Edmund Bridges, Isaac Cummings, and Edmund Towne were 3 of the 7 who made depositions against Thomas at this time, as well as several years later. And Edmund Towne, of course, being the son of Joanna and William Towne. Rumors regarding Thomas Gilbert's drinking began early in 1669, when Constable William Averill Jr. was ethically compelled to correct Thomas for publicly announcing the incorrect date for the next colony-wide day of Thanksgiving. If William did not take this time to correct Thomas publicly, residents may have been held legally liable. Thomas responded to the assembly that he was not drunk and was insulted at William's remarks. Furthermore, he would let this matter be settled by the court. A couple of months later, several people noticed that something was not right with the Reverend one Sabbath day. Congregants waited for a long time for Thomas to arrive at the meeting house, again, right over in that direction, though he lived less than a mile away, again, same direction. Some people waited so long that they just left. The ones who remained were in for drama that could rival a storyline of General Hospital. Sarah Gould said Thomas fell as he entered the meeting house when he finally arrived. The elder Isaac Cummings noticed Thomas was not acting as himself during service. After the prayer was said, Isaac publicly took issue that Thomas was both singing and speaking the psalm out of order, and it was impossible for the congregants to follow along. Sarah Gould also said that Thomas was clipping his words during the service so that she could not understand what was being said. So he was most likely lisping at this time. Though some were laughing because of this, Isaac boldly stood up and said, "Stop! You are out of order and dangerously close to blaspheming the Lord's name." Thomas replied, "Silence! I am comforted by singing, so sit down." Thomas then repeated the same prayer and the same psalm. Isaac stood up again and told Thomas clearly he had no idea what he was doing. The maddened minister stepped down from the pulpit and thunderously declared, "You people are the most despicable I have ever had the displeasure to deal with. I will not preach amongst you no more." The stunned congregants sat in silence as Thomas stormed out of the meeting house without saying the final blessing. Francis Peabody was the only member to go after Thomas. According to William Perkins, Thomas came back, stomped down the aisle, and boldly declared directly to John Gould, John Reddington, and Thomas Baker that no one would persuade him to return. By the way, this was a communion day. Oddly, some who witnessed the drama were dinner guests at the parsonage later that same day. So the parsonage would have been over in this direction again, as the Parson Capon house is over here, and that one was actually built around the year 1684. So again, parsonage over here. Sarah Gould saw her brother-in-law, Thomas Perkins, pour the leftover communion wine into a small golden cup at the parsonage, and the cup was then about 3/4 full, and he offered it to the minister. Sarah said Thomas Gilbert drank some of the wine before offering the cup to Joanna Towne. Sarah's brother and sister-in-law witnessed something a little bit different. Timothy had no doubt that Thomas did not drink from the cup before it was offered to Joanna Towne the first time, whereas his wife Phoebe was not so sure. After the cup was passed to about 3 more people, it eventually came back to Thomas, who downed the rest of the contents. According to Phoebe Perkins and Sarah Gould, the Reverend's voice seemed lower and his eyes grew dim. Thomas sank back in his chair and, shortly after, sang the psalm so the words were not understood as earlier in the day. After dinner, Sarah and Phoebe went into another room only to hear Thomas become physically ill. Phoebe wondered out loud why her husband would offer Thomas Gilbert the cup when he previously had too much to drink already. The self-described moody minister finally did return to preach sometime later, probably about 3 weeks later, and apologized, saying he was, quote-unquote, distempered due to the unseasonable weather and other situations in which he had to deal, or with which he had to deal, the week prior to this outburst. This, however, did not change things between Sarah Gould and the Gilberts. Sarah Gould made a fervent foe with Thomas Gilbert's wife, Sarah. Both Sarahs appeared in court where Sarah Gilbert accused Sarah Gould of perjury. After the charges were read in court, the visibly shaken Sarah Gilbert shouted to the judges that Sarah Gould was lying. She then turned to Sarah Gould and said, "Take heed what you swear to that paper." Sarah Gould gave her a dirty look, looked at the judges, then proceeded to swear her own testimony was in fact true. Sarah Gilbert directed her comments to the judges and said everything was false. Her husband did not fall down upon entering the meeting house. After all, she followed Thomas and Thomas Perkins all the way to service. The cup was not as full as some claimed at dinner. Thomas refused the cup the first time it was passed to him, and what he eventually polished off at the end was only 2 or 3 spoonfuls at most. Sarah Gilbert declared her husband was not a drunkard. In her fight to defend her husband and his fight to defend his own honor, one might conclude that the Gilberts inadvertently set themselves against the fierce and powerful force known as Ensign John Gould. Picture this. Sarah and John Gould sat during the service towards the front of the meeting house as Reverend Gilbert prayed Psalm 31. The Reverend and the Goulds are not too far apart. Thomas suddenly stopped after he prayed verse 18, which states that liars would suddenly be silenced. Thomas placed his hand on the book and glared over at Sarah Gould. This angered and provoked John. Edmund Bridges overheard John say later that he would have Thomas Gilbert's tongue clipped if he continued lying about John himself during his sermons. And yes, the torture of tongue clipping was a very real thing. John Gould eventually decided to censor Thomas using a more humane legal method. September 27, 1671, John filed a complaint and he did not hold back. First, John Gould said, after being ordered by the court to shape up, Thomas attached papers on the meeting house door and left the congregation without a minister for 3 solid weeks. The only way Thomas would return was if church members falsely testified that they did not hear him speak against authority. Second, Thomas scolded those who complained against him. Third, Thomas played the victim, blaming church members without being able to provide proof. He also threatened church members, reprimanding them during service so that they would no longer publicly challenge him, as with Isaac Cummings Sr. And lastly, John Gould asked the court to free the community from the intolerable burden and discontent as Thomas continued to blaspheme the Lord's Day, venting his anger towards his congregants during his sermons rather than bringing them closer to salvation. The witnesses to this particular letter were Thomas Baker, William Perkins, and John Cummings. Prior depositions were probably reviewed for this case, but a new one was made by Edmund Towne with 2 others against the minister. Edmund witnessed firsthand what one might believe to be deception on the part of Thomas Gilbert. One of the senior Perkins was preparing to travel abroad and wanted the congregation's permission to receive the sacrament before he left. So Thomas Gilbert asked Perkins to leave the meeting house so the congregation would make a vote, which he did. The congregation voted for Perkins to receive the sacrament, but Thomas Gilbert did not invite Perkins to come back into the meeting house. Well, finally, Perkins decides to come back on his own accord and asked, what was your decision? Are you guys going to let me receive communion or not? Thomas Gilbert said that the vote had failed. Why Thomas did this probably left baffled church members pondering in their pews. Ultimately, the court expressed sorrow that their counsel to Thomas was not heeded initially. The judges were aware of his alcoholic tendencies. The court was also aware that Thomas either attempted to justify or outright deny his actions against church members during his sermons. And I quote, "Therefore, we cannot but this second time reiterate our advice and admonition," etc. I personally believe it was this letter of complaints by John Gould to the court which brought about Thomas Gilbert's dismissal from the Topsfield Church. So, how did Joanna Towne fit into this situation? Joanna was the only member of the congregation who testified for Thomas Gilbert. She was also present at dinner at the parsonage. As Joanna told the story, Thomas was not behaving in an unusual way. She would have noticed odd behavior as she was sitting right next to him. Furthermore, any unusual behavior may have been due to Thomas not feeling either mentally or physically well. Not from drinking too much as, and I quote, "some so uncharitably surmise against him." Joanna said Thomas did not drink too much sacrament wine, did not sink into his chair, nor did his eyes grow dim. The others were simply wrong. Thomas offered Joanna the cup when it was initially offered to him. Thomas said to Joanna, "You are older and need it more than I." The cup made the rounds before returning to Thomas the second time with a little wine left in the cup. Thomas drank the remaining contents, which, according to Joanna, was about 2 or 3 spoonfuls. Joanna swore that Thomas ate and drank in moderation that day and was aware of his words and his actions. So now, let's fast forward to April of 1692. Hannah Putnam gave birth to a presumably healthy child early in April. Sadly, the baby soon suffered violent seizures. Her husband, John, for whatever reason, said that he had heard something regarding Rebecca, Mary, and Sarah's mother. Then he started to suffer similar symptoms. John recovered. John and Hannah did all they could to save their child. Frantic, they sent for John's mother, Elizabeth, even though it was dark. As soon as Elizabeth saw her grandchild, she declared the child was bewitched. A doctor was also sent for either at the same time or shortly after, and also could not help the child. After 2 days, the baby suffered such a violent death that John Putnam said it was enough to pierce a stony heart. How heartbreaking for the Putnam family. According to a prior conversation with his cousin-in-law, Ann Putnam Sr., regarding Rebecca and Sarah, John said that the apples did not fall far from the tree. Since Rebecca and Mary's specters could not kill John, they killed his child. One might find it interesting that John and Hannah's deposition is against all 3 Towne sisters, though Ann Putnam Sr.'s only names 2 of the Towne sisters. The notes from the Records of the Salem Witch Hunt, page 430, state that John Jr.'s deposition was probably used at Rebecca's trial and maybe used at Mary Estes' trial as well. The only time Joanna is mentioned... I'll start again because of the motorcycle. The only time Joanna is mentioned in records and files of the Essex County is when she defended Thomas Gilbert. So, how does one conclude that because Joanna defended the minister 21 years earlier, that she was thought of as a witch in 1692, long after her death? Who kept the gossip wheel moving forward? John and Phoebe Gould Perkins were siblings. John Gould and Phoebe Gould Perkins were siblings. They were also first cousins once removed to Thomas Putnam Jr. and John Putnam Jr., who were Putnam cousins. Would Phoebe Perkins spread the gossip? Maybe. Since she lived 5 miles north of her Putnam cousins, Phoebe may have visited them on occasion, and travel was feasible. John Gould, would he have spread these rumors? Maybe, but I'm not so sure. But, like his sister Phoebe Perkins, he did not live too far from the Putnam clan. He was alive and called to depose in 1692. However, from what I read of John Gould, he was an honorable man, respected by his community. He did express his disapproval sometimes and was justly angry at other times. In court documents I have read, John remained very specific with whom he had issues. Notice one person he does not name in his letter of complaint to the court against Thomas Gilbert, Joanna Towne. So it is my opinion that the gossip kept circulating amongst the women. So would Sarah Gould, John Gould's wife? Maybe. She was alive in 1692 and an in-law to the Putnam crew, of course. Phoebe Towne? Again, around the World Wide Web, people falsely state that there must have been tension because Joanna was living with Phoebe when this all happened. But now that I know with fairly amount of accuracy that William was still alive when Joanna testified for the minister, and Joanna most likely lived with Joseph and Phoebe after William's death. I think she had a cordial relationship with Phoebe at the least, because she actually lived with them after this situation happened. So I hope that they had at least a cordial relationship, and who knows, maybe they wound up having a warm and loving relationship. What does everyone else think? I'd love to hear your comments or read your comments in the comments section. And again, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you already haven't, and like this video if you would like. And also, I have provided the PayPal link for those of you who would like to donate so that we can continue to offer quality content on my video YouTube channel. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.